Chapter 1.
There is one other thing.
Take 13. F*** my stupid perfectionist life. Welcome back to Spoiler I Hardly. Let me lay... Are you serious? Take 14. Welcome back to Spoiler I Hardly. This is a long video, so let me lay the deal on you. I'm going to spend the first couple minutes explaining what this video is about, and then you're going to be interested, and then you're going to watch the whole thing, and you're going to have a great time. Deal? We just got Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It was great. We got House of the Dragon Season 3 coming out in June. In the entire time I've seen this community, I have never seen it this enthusiastic and positive about the direction that everything is going in, which is pretty remarkable given that this is the 15th consecutive year of waiting for the next book.
I've been writing these books off and on since 1971, and I suspect I will still be writing them 5-6 years from now before I can finally wind up the story the way I see it winding up.
This video can be your chance to come and join the rest of us. I got into this whole Westeros community a few years ago when I reread the books and rewatched the main show. The reason why I have a channel in the first place is when I went to rewatch Game of Thrones, I saw Season 1, Episode 5, and I was like, this rocks. I'm not sure the rest of the season works half as well without it in the middle. I decided that I wanted to talk to people for a long while about what I thought made it such a great episode and such a great era of TV.
Warning, this product contains spoilers for the book A Game of Thrones up to the chapter Jon 6 and for Game of Thrones Season 1 episodes 1 to 7.
And I wrote a really long script. Look, good script, I back the script, but that took an eternity to make for a first YouTube video. I will never make a video that long again. And then it got copyright struck. And I was like, okay, I'm going to come back and fix this another day. I have other video ideas I want to get onto. Well, that other day has come because the momentum is here for Game of Thrones stuff. So here you go, big long Game of Thrones video. And I have made it a lot better than a first ever YouTube video. So what have I done? There was a whole long segment at the start about how Game of Thrones eventually got bad. I scrapped that all. You don't need me to make that point. Everyone knows it. My reasons weren't that good anyway.
But wait, there's more.
I rewrote that whole script to flesh it out, re-recorded it all with a proper mic, upgraded the visuals, brought in more supporting sources, presented in a complete package that took me ages to make. Never remaking one of my videos again, but I'm really happy to make it a permanent installation on my channel. I trust that when you watch my videos, you'll go, this is good. I enjoyed this. Next one, please. And it will come out when it comes out, when I know it's ready and great to present. Take it away, past me.
Do not apply different point redux if you are allergic to plot twists. User discretion is advised. The following content may be violent or disturbing. Consult your country's Chapter 2.
Westeros is so back.
George R. R. Martin's A Game of Thrones, the novel, is a modern classic. 2011's debut season of Game of Thrones is a worthy adaptation. The first half of the season acquaints us with a shining kingdom, its proud families, and the cracks in the facade. The second thrills with its descent into all-out war. Those are both gripping stories, but those are very different stories to tell. The viewer had to be convinced that a kingdom could fall this far, this fast, uncle against nephew, brother against brother. There had to be a bridge between the twins, a bridge whose collapse would be utterly compelling. Enter Episode 5, The Wolf and the Lion. Join me on a tour through the episode, not just to remember some great TV, but to explain the depths of meaning and layers of subtext achieved here and really excelled in television. Deep storytelling on TV is a real struggle. Martin structures his books exclusively through a stable of point-of-view characters, mainly the Stark children Tyrion and Daenerys, but there are dozens besides. He does this to relentlessly scrutinize how much our different perspectives can distort the same events, and I love that about A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, imagine trying to convey even a couple of distinctive points of view on the same scenes in a visual medium. Any show would struggle with that experiment. You'd need more interruptions by voiceover narration than Arrested Development. For the low-budget, high-drama chaos machine that was the first season, no chance. But out of weakness came strength. Game of Thrones was free to add new scenes entirely between non-POV characters. scenes we could never witness otherwise. Tywin, Marjorie, Podrick, and one of those scenes serves as the jewel in the Wolf and the Lion's crown, so we will cap off our tour through the episode with an achievement that belongs solely to the show. A conversation that never happened in the books. See the last time that King Robert and Queen Cersei, husband and wife, upon whose marriage the post-Targaryen realm was built, ever spoke truth to each other. The last time they spoke as equals, the last time till death did them part. Come and see The Wolf and the Lion. Chapter 3. Cats in the Vale for the Falcon Moon. The only scenes we don't need to cover are a back-to-back pairing of Theon hanging out with Ross and Maester Lewin tutoring Bran.
Famed for their skills at archery.
Who says this? Huh, I guess that bit of foreshadowing pays off. They are the tail end of the season's first half, with its focus on expositing lore and characterizations that often take some time to matter. They are the exception to the rule that rules The Wolf and the Lion. All other scenes must be about active plots that are going to imminently pay off in big ways. We don't see the Targaryens and the Dothraki, and we don't see the Night's Watch at Castle Black. Our first of 3 plot lines is the capstone to one of the best plot beats of the entire series, Catelyn's arrest of Tyrion. She closed out the last episode, crowing that
You said we were riding for Winterfell.
I did. Often and loudly.
now we learn that she spread misinformation. She's really gunning for her sister Lysa in the Vale. Catelyn looks like the smartest player in Westeros right now. The wolf has the lion in its paws. A favourable status quo for the good guys. What could go wrong? The gang gets ambushed by mountain tribesmen. Tyrion bonds with salesman who warns what will happen if the writer's room refuse to redraft season 8.
I will stand in the kitchen and put a bread knife through my throat if that happens.
And Cat undergoes a hilarious about-face. To Jon Arryn's knights, Lysa Tully is in charge here, and don't you dare say otherwise. She takes one look at how far gone Lysa is.
He killed your father. He murdered the hand of the king.
And backpedals. The prisoner's life is in her hands, not Lysa's.
This man is my prisoner. I will not have him harmed.
And definitely not her son's.
Mummy, I want to see the Batman fly.
It's a rapid collapse of confidence that presages the show's many best-laid plans gang after ugly. The first demonstration that Game of Thrones can convince you so totally that everything will go to plan, and yet when it all goes wrong, you don't feel confused and misled. You understand exactly how rapidly fortunes can change. Like when news of this kidnapping reaches King's Landing.
She's taking the imp.
Oh my god.
Chapter 4. The Lion does not concern itself with the challenge rating of wolves. The aesthetics and performances of King's Landing are civil and courtly and speak to the order maintained by the City Watch. It's harder to raise tensions there than elsewhere. Open violence from the outset, right under the King's nose, would break the audience's immersion. So, the show gets us on the edge of the couch with the fear of how Cat's hectic storyline will impact on Ned's. The looser Cat's grip looks, the more palpitations Ned gives you by dithering in the capital. That tension escalates across the entire episode until it is unleashed in explosive fashion to close out the wolf and the lion. Jom accosts Ned for Cat's crime outside a bordello. Littlefinger dips with a promise. He'll summon the City Watch. This is not how it goes down. Instead, the wolf and the lion at last stop stalking round in circles and go for each other's throats. The mutual loathing between Jon and Ned goes back to the moment the Kingslayer was born in the sack 15 years prior. Now, that feeling has real meaning. 5 episodes in, rivalries are being not just exposited but actively constructed. These motivations lend emotional weight to characters' later actions. Jom's second half of the season would be much less interesting if he hadn't forged personal connections to Robb earlier in the season, and Robb's father here and now. Indeed, as we learn in the opening to You Win or You Die, Ned got off lightly.
Why is he still alive?
it wouldn't have been clean.
Jom logically understands that killing Ned kills Tyrion. On the other hand, if you choose to swing a sword at somebody, whether or not you intend to kill them, you are taking a bloody big risk that you are going to kill them. He clearly wants Ned dead in the heat of battle, and only cuts it out once a spear through the leg makes Ned's execution a dishonourable prospect. Ned is a good swordsman. He survived the melee against Kingsguard's Hightower, Whent and Dane, the greatest swordsman he had ever seen. He wields ice, Valyrian steel. Ned is also averse to bloodshed, out of practice, and certainly not warmed up right now. This is less Boromir against the hordes of Mordor, more Tintin walking out of a witness's apartment right into a drive-by. Jaime Lannister is arguably the greatest swordsman in Westeros. If fate chances her dice a little differently and no one steps in to injure Ned, Jaime probably leaves our protagonist dead in the streets, and all hell would rip right loose. The wolf and the lion is carefully poised because it's not total war, it's just the tipping point. The episode simultaneously spikes the tension, leaves space for things to get a lot worse, and warns that all that would require is a willful Lannister and a blade. In our next chapter, we'll examine why Ned was in the wrong place at the right time, but to wrap this one up, let's pin a thought for our last couple chapters in this video. Jaime is as close as it comes to a mirror image of Cersei. They are twins, their narcissism manifests through their mutual admiration. Jaime feels that the Lannisters are existentially threatened by the Starks. He is willing to unleash violence under the king's nose in defiance of the king. The last time Jaime defied a king, he killed him. If he reflects his twin sister, what do we think he's saying to her? And what's she saying to him? Where is her head at? Chapter 5, Clouseaun the White Wolf. Ned thinks he is done in the city. We'll explore why in the chapter after this one. But first, he is unable to resist one last crack at the mysteries of Kingsland. Littlefinger leads him to the last people who Jon Arryn ever visited. Jon Arryn's death was the inciting incident of the series. That motivated evidence gathering. By dwelling yet again on similar evidence to what we've seen before, Game of Thrones reinforces our understanding of that evidence. That ensures that we're well prepared to instantly grasp the shock reveal in the next episode, why Jon Arryn died. That completely changes the game. Varys confirms Ned's belief that Jon Arryn was murdered. The poisoner was close to the target, Sir Hugh, Jon Arryn's squire, and a newly minted knight.
There was one boy. All he was he owed to Jon Arryn.
Sir Hugh.
Slain by Sir Gregor's lance in the hand's tourney. Was he murdered too, and if so, why? All of the warnings that Ned have collectively received look awfully auspicious.
They said they were going to kill you.
The whole city will know by tomorrow. Know what?
We're starting out with Small Fry. These are characters whose individual deaths mean little to the plot, less to the characters, and nothing emotionally, so the show isn't overplaying its hand too soon. But they convey the important point that, for all the good manners and professions of friendship on display, the capital is a nest of vipers, and the nest is a Slytherin. But these murders still conceal themselves from the king's rules and the king's laws. So why was Ned vulnerable to Jaime's open attack? A squabble between equal houses. Rather than possessing the full legal protections of the hand of the king, this episode is already doing so much. Two of its plotlines, Kat's hostage escapades and Ned's messy exfiltration.
But wait, there's more.
Those are just a taster for the third and final plotline that consumes the rest of the episode. The most complex, the deepest, and the richest of them all, not only in this episode, but one of the best written and acted in the entire show. Chapter 6. Funny? Funny how?
I mean, what's funny about it?
Ned and the men who call him friend and ally, Peter, Varys, Robert, fall into a catastrophic schism. Before we come to the issue that divides him so, let's set the scene between the Hand and his king. The opening to the episode reprises the first display of the Ned-Robert friendship. Ned calls him fat. Robert is no longer a lean warrior and rider. There's a tense moment, a test of if their old roughhouse friendship can survive despite the shackles that bind them today. Ned as Warden of the North, Robert as his king and superior. Both burst out laughing. You can feel the strain. Robert totally fails the nice to the waiter test with Lancel. The more Ned sees of Robert, the more he realizes that the friend he once knew has melted into the form of a paranoid, callous king, and the strain becomes unbearable at the small council meeting. For once, Robert cares enough to tag along, because Varys has passed on news. So Jorah Mormont alleges that Daenerys is pregnant. This will come as a shock to most of the audience. We knew about Daenerys, but Mormont, a traitor? But he seemed like such a nice fellow, what do you mean? Some viewers, however, had keen eyes and ears. Note his reaction to the news of Daenerys' pregnancy 2 episodes prior in Lord Snow.
The Khaleesi have baby inside her.
Where are you going?
I need to ride.
But where?
To Quahog.
I have to return some videotapes.
I'll catch you. The hoard's easy to find.
The episode later, during Cripples, Bastards and Broken Things, Jorah says that he wants to go home. Daenerys processes this statement through the arc that she's going through. She's starting to think maybe she should be the one to conquer back Westeros, not Viserys, and so she sees Jorah as a supporter of that ambition. However, he's really hoping that a useful morsel like this, and what the king may choose to do with it, will be worth a royal pardon.
You can go home now.
I have to return some videotapes.
Why am I giving any time to this prior Targaryen plotline? Because Robert has a massive reaction to this news, even though it's coming from Jorah Mormont. Robert almost never reacts to even vital updates on the state of the realm. Mormont's desperate and he's proven faithless thrice already, once enslaving under Eddard's nose, twice in fleeing his lord's justice, and a third time in betraying the Targaryens too. He is an absolutely worthless source. We the audience know he's telling the truth. No way should anybody in this room have confidence in his word. Ned's mistrust is the only reasonable position. Mormont's unreliability doesn't matter to Robert. Any chance that this is true decides him. A live Targaryen is a living alternative to his rule. A living alternative chances a restoration of the Mad King's regime. This is why the Demon of the Trident never punished Sirs Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch for murdering Elia Martell and her children. Robert and Ned and Jon Arryn justified treason against King Aerys by way of his executions of the innocent. Robert executed the innocent to prevent another King Aerys.
Robert coming back into his house and them going down to look at those ghosts, it definitely sparked something in Ned that he then spends the rest of the book dealing with. I mean, later on in the book you get his intense dream about the Lyanna's Bed of Blood and the Tower of Joy.
Yep.
He starts hearing "Promise Me, Ned" over and over again. I honestly don't get the sense it was this bad before Robert showed up. Like, it was probably still there, but the sense I get in these chapters is that it's as he goes to King's Landing, where his family was killed, and it's these memories and dreams are starting to boil up from within him more than they have in a long time, and it's just all these associations of dead children and loss and trauma. It's like Ned is just being forced to relive all of this.
Yeah,
and it's something and then he brings his daughters into King's Landing and fears they're gonna die, and it's just this kind of horrible cycle, and the fragile heart of it, what holds him to it is his friendship with Robert, the boy he loved and gave him the best times of his life.
A ruler of the good times, happy funland, Rainbow's End status quo is a man who will sacrifice Tamariki to keep his throne. Viserys and Daenerys escaped the sack. The chances existed for 15 years that these Targaryen children would create more heirs to their line and forge new alliances. If Robert's end justify the means ideology were consistent, he would have killed Viserys and Daenerys like he killed Aegon. 15 years is more than enough time for a man with the resources of a continent to whack 2 children with few friends. Yet Robert has, as in so many matters, remained passive without a clear strategic vision for the future. The dominoes began to fall once Daenerys wed Khal Drogo, and Viserys could claim 40,000 Dothraki Screamers as the first Targaryen army since Stannis conquered Dragonstone. Robert is handling this in the stupidest possible way. He's fine with killing these teens, but he's only bothering to try once they actually have an army to defend them and, if need be, avenge them. It's actually even more daft than you think, because they heard about the wedding 3 episodes prior. You would logically conclude that royals marry for the purpose of producing heirs, but the king's unfocused mind wandered on, fixated on rekindling his friendship with Ned and reviving the good old days, looking forward to the tourney. He hasn't set a clear red line of relevance for claimants to his throne. A pretender forging an alliance with a possible army means little to him. Now, the news of a pregnancy revives all the old memories, how he feels permanently wounded by the Targaryens, all because Prince Rhaegar abducted his betrothed Lyanna, and how Robert permitted Lannister soldiers to abuse and murder the innocents of the Elia branch to make sure that they could never return to claim his throne. He would rather murder 2 children, one of them pregnant, than leave them be and see what happens. Even though he was perfectly fine leaving them be and seeing what happened before they pressed his buttons, we are being shown that the Rangatira is both bloodthirsty and stupid. Ned looks around the council for allies, and who does he find? Varys reluctantly defends assassination as a vile act for the good of the realm. On the surface, this is more of his simpering, foppish characterization, and Pycelle says the same thing. But this does hint at Varys' earnest belief that nasty deeds benefit the idea of the realm, while we know from Pycelle's role in the sack that he is insincere. Any sympathy with Ned evaporates as Renly proclaims, "We should have had them both killed years ago." That speaks to the sort of man he is. For all his pretensions to being the kinder, gentler Baratheon brother, Renly is remarkably callous about the impacts a king can have. The statement is intended to imply he's been nursing this opinion for years, putting him on the right side of history in the history written by the victors. It's a way to demonstrate he's the most loyal of all, like a hardline Russian oligarch or minister pressing Putin to go even further and faster. Nobody can possibly question his fealty to Robert's rule if the only thing that disappoints him about Robert's Kawanatanga is that Robert's not Robert enough. And Littlefinger says the same thing, just more crudely. Everybody is well characterized in their own way here as reaching the same sycophantic conclusion, supporting Robert's grip on power. Each and every one wants to employ the transformative power of violence to recast Rua Tamariki as corpses. The only difference is in degrees of enthusiasm. While taking care to distinguish each individual character, the Wolf and the Lion cements that King's Landing has a far screwier moral compass than Winterfell, and all of that explains why a protagonist, conservative in character, instead of working to build alliances, promptly takes radical action. For Ned, enough is enough. The Hand all but calls his king a new heiress, resigns, and scrambles to pack.
Then we're no better than the Mad King. Careful, Ned, careful now.
This is astonishing on 2 levels. The first is for anybody to sacrifice their power to govern many thousands over the lives of 2 children who aren't even really Westerosi. That is a decision that almost nobody else would make. If Robert is both bloodthirsty and stupid, Ned is both deeply averse to selfish grasping for power and also deeply unpragmatic in the pursuit of good. The second is that Ned is convinced by now that King's Landing is so venomous that even his daughters are at imminent risk of harm. These are the sort of actions necessary to show to the audience that all these nobles living side by side really could explode into violence soon enough, and that there's more at stake here than a duel between trained soldiers on the street. A Song of Ice and Fire constantly reminds you how the innocent suffer in war. The Wolf and the Lion thoughtfully demonstrates how all these incredibly dangerous people are being motivated by defenseless children. Chapter 7. All the spiders clap along. Turn to a Stark daughter at risk of envenomation. Arya overhears Varys' Correro with Illyrio Motapus of treasons. The spider only cares to delay, not avert, wars between Wolf and Lion, between the Clouseaun and the Iron Throne, though he declines Illyrio's suggestion of murdering Ned. Varys' lack of offense at the idea only raises more questions for us about what happened to Jon Arryn, and we can independently verify that Varys told the truth about Daenerys to the small council and the king, seemingly to her detriment and Robert's advantage. Yet here he is, conniving for Daenerys and against Robert. Even a defender of the realm will burn it down to save it, and even a defender as competent as he fears he cannot keep the Lannisters and the Starks from each other's throats. Wounded mana and fear for the children outpaces intelligent plotting. The viewer now understands that the realm is pulling apart in every direction. Every single King's Landingite not named Eddard Stark is working an angle to the detriment of short-term peace and stability. Varys and Littlefinger wage their war of wordplay and secrets in front of the Iron Throne. Varys opposes Ned's investigation into Jon Arryn. He threatens to reveal Baelish to the Lannisters for assisting in these inquiries. Peter, in turn, tells Varys he knows about his meeting with Mr. Metapus. For once, the Spider's Greek mask slips. Each faces mutually assured destruction if they expose the other. Scenes like these serve as explanations for how characters with such divergent goals can remain nominally on the same team for so long. They are locked into an unstable equilibrium until the ground shifts beneath them and they are free to finally strike at their enemies. This season is showing us one big Jenga tower of Pisa. Renly provides an out to their standoff for today, because that's when he arrives bearing the aforementioned news that his brother will be attending a meeting of the small council. It's time to argue about whether to kill some kids. This exception demonstrates the rule. Robert typically isn't present at King's Council. Ergo, the realm is de facto governed by scenes such as these, where shadowy figures like Varys and Littlefinger and Pycelle lie and scheme in ways Robert totally fails to comprehend. It is a rotten edifice to build a realm on. But now that we understand every other councillor, it's time to talk about the next most powerful after Robert and Ned, Renly. Chapter 8. The Third Brother. To the Wolf and the Lion, Renly is the most important character to understand outside of Robert and Cersei. Remember what I said about Jon being the mirror to Cersei? Do you see how in other episodes Viserys serves as a foil to Daenerys? In precisely the same way, set Renly in your mind next to Robert. He is the only other Baratheon we have met. He is of the royal dynasty. He shares Robert's genes, whakapapa, and upbringing. With Stannis absent, Renly is our one chance to look at what else a royal Baratheon can be. The Wolf and the Lion first seeds in Renly at the opening bout between Sirs Gregor Clegane and Loras Tyrell, the newly introduced Knight of Flowers. I'm mostly assessing the episode by what information and themes it communicates, but to give it its due, this is a thoroughly entertaining hook. There's the obvious signs that Loras would really rather give the rose to Renly than Sansa. More amusement is derived from Littlefinger and Renly snipping back and forth at each other. They must have done this around the council table for so many years, and this is the one clue to an important fact. These two detest each other and do not like to work together. Just like Varys and Pycelle, we have another pairing of rival councillors. So Loras, for his part, is introduced as a paragon to the public and a glory hound to more discerning eyes.
No, stop! What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Clegane Hall is a sight to behold. It's of interest that even the bloodthirsty Robert cannot stomach this titanic clash. This is a really fun piece of fight choreography, and we see a very tangible demonstration of how Gregor gets away with murder. Granted, in this case it's just murder of a horse and attempted murder of two fellow knights, but when God sings of his creations, will not a horse be part of his choir? So far, Tipping Point Redux has thoroughly examined so many of the steps this episode takes away from stability and towards bloodshed, but we still have one more scene to talk about before we get to the best. Structurally, this episode now offers up a masterclass, a back-to-back pairing of contrasts. People in relationships muse idly on the future and the past. That's all. This gives us a breather before shocking us with ending on the cliffhanger of Jean's attack, and lets us focus on what's most important to a story, more so than action or danger or the flagrant violation of the king's peace. What matters most is what emotions move characters and how they clash and flow in their relationships to one another. Chapter 9. A Puppet and His Strings. Before we get into Lenly, or Rorys as you prefer, let's make that structural contrast to the other partner-up scene explicit. Ronly, or Lornas as you prefer, are a secret and uncountenanced couple, but they feel genuine aroha and passion for each other. Sobert, or Rosie, possess the ultimate legal and political recognition of their commitment to each other. Not only are they married, they're the marriage, parents to the realm. However, as their counterparts point out, there's no spark between Robert and Cersei. The opposite of a spark. Antimatter. The contrast is sharpened as Renly wastes no time totally failing to separate downtime from business. He openly shares state secrets like the Robert Ned blob, the news about Daenerys Dracarys, and what they're going to do about it. Is heedless of the consequences of leaking to the second most powerful house in Westeros. Just as Robert and Rhaegar's obsession over Lyanna have wrecked the realm and been indirectly responsible for the deaths of thousands, Renly, too, is happy to place what he wants out of life ahead of his duty to his subjects. And importantly, unlike many a blustering fool throughout the series, Renly doesn't see Loras knowing his weaknesses as a weakness. He is okay with being vulnerable. We learn that Renly is afraid of the sight of blood, and Loras sheds the stags later in the scene to make a point, and he hates hunting. In contrast, Renly implies that part of why Robert wants the Targaryen children dead is that his bloodlust is sated by ordering hits, not just wielding the hammer himself. Loras outright states that Robert killed his way to the throne, suggesting that all he can do to stay on top is just keep on killing. That's not just a practical statement of the hard but necessary sacrifices we make to keep stability and order. It's an indictment of a school of thought. A way of shaping yourself so that every human looks like a nail, and what has Robert got to hand but his hammer? Renly seems frankly bemused at the reality that his big brother is the king. His contempt extends to the power that the intolerable Lannisters wield in the capital.
The Lannisters, they may be the most pompous, ponderous the gods ever suffered to walk the world, but they do have an outrageous
and you
amount
get the
of
sense
money.
that if a Lannister sat on the small council, a Tywin or a Kevin perhaps, that they would make every council meeting look like Succession demo tapes. As A Golden Crown establishes, the financial backing of the Lannisters gives them enormous leverage over Robert, to the point where he can't even pursue justice against them. Renly is at least smart enough to understand the disastrous hostage situation in front of his eyes. Is he smarter than that? Yeah. Renly is a man of few motives. He seems content to represent Baratheon interests on the council if neither of his brothers will. Stannis because of his even-handed fixation on justice and recent uncharacteristic distractedness. Robert because he got that TikTok attention span. Besides that, Renly likes to steal time away with Loras instead of being dragged along on Robert's pesky hunting trips. He is not consumed by his station or lineage, probably due to being fourth in line to the throne. While we typically associate the phrase minimal social mobility with down and outs, it also applies here to Renly. He's fourth in line between two physically healthy children and American Psycho skincare routine seen free no subscription 1080p.amv.
Then I apply an herb mint facial mask, which I leave on for 10 minutes while I prepare the rest.
He is Liege Lord of the Stormlands, and nothing suggests he gives a hoot about what happens on his Fenua. If anybody can come close to finding, perhaps not fulfillment, but at least satisfaction out of all the nobility of King's Landing, that's Renly, the guy the status quo works for. Renly is two things. One, he is a failure of imagination on the part of the scriptwriters. The books do far more to present him as Robert 2.0, right down to the same hulking physique, and expose him at his core as a lawless warlord. He's miscast and watered down by scriptwriters who clearly refuse to portray the courtly homosexual gentleman as masculine and powerful too. We should have had them both killed years ago. Makes for a far more interesting and unique character than had to be done, unpleasant though it is. The scriptwriter problem is exacerbated by the lack of on-screen chemistry between Geth and Anthony, and Finn Jones in a show with much stronger romantic performances. 2. None of this prevents Show Renly from presenting a fascinating contrast with his big brother, just in some different ways. In ways, he has more in common with his fellow small councillors of insignificant birth than with the rest of the royal line. Renly is mocked by Robert and Stannis for his weakness, and confesses in private that he's a lot less enthusiastic about killing Targaryen Tamariki than he displayed earlier. He maintains that the dirty deed must be done, but Renly's public face is clearly a performance of resolve. This is the paradox of King's Landing. The powerful decide whose lives will end when. In the same breath, they must pretend to their allies that their intentions are peaceful, and yet when it comes to pronouncing death on the outcrowd, they must fake enthusiasm for bloodshed opposite their supposed courtly values. The script that most comes to mind is The Death of Stalin, with Stalin's henchmen constantly praising his purges and excesses. It's a political system that rewards both lying and criminal intent. Do I have to say it again? Not stable, not good, red flags, danger coming. Renly in turn teases Loras as a spoiled brat who has never seen war. Already, the long reach of the past starts to poke through during the latter parts of this episode. How does Renly have a leg to stand on? Because he was holed up with Stannis during the Siege of Storm's End. Stannis describes that siege as a deeply taxing test of attrition and hunger, but not particularly violent. Mace Tyrell didn't care to risk his forces in battle. Renly has probably never seen combat, and yet turn the disc to the very next episode for a relevant episode. Renly is set off by Robert gabbing either obliviously or cheekily about him and women.
Before that, when the Mad King slaughtered women and babies because the voices in his head told him
Much the same way as how Robert presses Ned on a sore spot of Jon and Ashara. Just as Game of Thrones shocked audiences familiar with the likes of Lord of the Rings by exposing them to graphic subjects, violence and boobies and sex on TV, Robert forces his subjects to look directly at the crude iron his realm is built on, babies' blood and abused women. In that way, he reinforces the culture of approval for his leadership. But it's not just clever Stalinist control. This is also an emotional pathway for Robert to deflect from any discomfort and guilt he feels by hearing what he wants to from those around him. We're seeing resemblances to not just the death of Sauron, but also Better Call Saul, a show which lives and breathes on a constant diet of confident and important declarations, founded on emotional instability and uncertainty. Renly is triggered to temper by Robert's glorification of days gone by Robert's rare capacity to thrive on brutality. The years of the Mad King clearly left an impression on Renly. He sure doesn't appreciate Robert condescending to him as too young to remember, even though Robert was 21, Stannis 19, and Renly was only 6. A scared little boy with nobody to turn to but his stone-faced older brother who, no doubt, kept none of the severity of their situation from him. Renly watched his Kai dwindle down to roots and horses, dogs, cats, and rodents. Any time he wandered up to the parapets, he could see surrounding them all the force of the Reach at land and sea. Even if he could barely comprehend it at the time, that's his one personal myth he gets to cling to and reflect on over the years, the one front of war he was part of. Little wonder that he has a different perspective from Robert. Robert got to kill his way through his enemies. Stannis rose to his responsibilities with his characteristic steel, having wrestled more with his oaths than his onions. Renly had to sit and wait to see if the scary Tyrell men would come kill him. And what's more, this history means it's awfully interesting that Renly can now be so close with the Tyrell. Is there something deeply rooted in his psychology there? A need for security by cozying up to that power he saw on display? Even though they were his enemies, whenever he parted with his gloomy brothers, exited the gloomy corridors to see the sun shine off their helms, were they not his first taste of the nights of summer? But the shining knight has a psyche of his own. Chapter 10, New House on the Block. In this hierarchy of put-downs to put you in your place, just as Robert's words aggravated Renly, Renly's little jabs needle at Loras. The Knight of Flowers sees himself as a hard worker when it comes to training his skills of sword and horse, not just naturally gifted. This is his purpose in life, what he takes pride in. He's playing directly against type for the foppish, sickly sweet Tyrells. He is both a dashing young gay lord and a fierce warrior who hits the gym. But he is in Robert's court, where veterans come to die. Without military experience, he needs some other point to put him on a level with the king's own brother. And he adopts the same route as the royal in-laws, bragging of being richer than Renly.
I have an outrageous amount of money. Not as much as the Lannisters, but a lot more than you.
That should set off alarm bells for the audience.
Huge debt problem.
What do you... No.
Multiple houses are far wealthier than the crown, which should come as no surprise with what we've heard about Robert's spending. Their power and the weakness of central authority can hardly make for a recipe for stability. Feudalism is supposed to run based on a hierarchy, the king's supreme ability to enforce laws, because nobody is strong enough to defy the king. And yet, the two legs of the kingdom, Lannister and Tyrell, are stronger than the head, and Robert is doing nothing to redress this. It's so cooked. Consider the historical example of the Magna Carta. King John's wars in France were ruinous enough that he had to levy exorbitant taxes. The opportunity cost for the nobles, not to mention the emotional sense of indignation, rose high enough that they figured they might as well spend that money on just challenging him in battle instead of paying up. It's the same logic that guides the donations of corporations, the 1%, unions, et al. To political campaigns to this day. And those nobles forced a constitutional document upon King John, restricting his right to tax them. Westeros enjoys nowhere near this level of institutional development, but Robert is clearly under an implicit compulsion not to cross the richest houses. Given the balance of power, they'd almost be fools not to with him. But Robert's inaction too offers the rich and powerful room to maneuver unchecked. And even though Loras is a warrior first, and an unofficial hubby second, he is here to use that power. He pitches the Tyrells as an alternative financial backer to the Lannisters, and the immediate implication is, well, why would the Tyrells agree to this? Surely they wouldn't do so just because of forbidden love. There is a confidence here that comes from being not an overambitious schemer. That's not who Loras is. He comes off as merely the messenger, delivering an improved missive from the brains of the family. And Renly is at least somewhat cautiously receptive to Loras' entreaties. He accepts that the flower is mightier than the stag, and perhaps the lion too. Loras' lack of political nous and directness of means is on full display when it comes to the succession. He waves aside how Renly's claim would be illegitimate by listing why other candidates cannot govern. Joffrey is a monster, fair. Tommen is 8, there's always regency, and Stannis has the personality of a lobster. Is that funny? Very. But I would hope you and I can agree that that shouldn't determine who rules a nation larger than Canada, Morocco, or Ukraine. As Loras interrogates, where is it written that power is the sole province of the worst, that thrones are only made for the hated and the feared? Leaders like Ned and Stannis are an awkward fit with Westeros' noble caste. Do they have the social skills to successfully forge governing coalitions? This theme is constantly explored through the show, and especially the books. It's a question begged by the inadequacy of the current class of leadership. The scriptwriters are using Loras to communicate 3 important pieces of setup work for the second season to efficiently communicate. 1. He introduces Stannis. His existence establishes an additional roadblock for Renly in the line of succession. There isn't just Robert in the way, there aren't just Cersei's sons, there is a third axis to consider here. The Song of Ice and Fire constantly intensifies the reader's interest by introducing more characters to challenge simple binary narratives. 2. Loras' dynamic with Renly symbolizes the Renly candidacy. His love for Renly represents the adoration that other candidates lack. Renly is the popular candidate, Stannis is decidedly not. But Renly is also unambitious. Loras occupies here the Lady Macbeth role, egging him on towards a greater power that, once within his possession, he will find entirely too tempting to relinquish. In Season 2, Melisandre will play the Lady Macbeth to Stannis, mirroring his distant unfamiliar visage and the terror he inspires. It's the strength of the series and being able to lend so much time to the supporting cast around the candidates that actually play the Game of Thrones. These Renly-Stannis comparisons aren't just for the future, they pay dividends now. Because the third and final benefit of Loras's words is that they invite us to consider, where does Robert fit between the brothers? Illyrio's claim that every house hides Targaryen flags and curses Robert as a usurper are unsubstantiated, but little indicates any love for Robert past the peripheral association with peace and good times. It's under his reign that Jorah has made his observations and formed his principle of popularity. The commoners care not for who sits the Iron Throne, only for the material facts of their own lives. It's the economy, stupid. Surely Robert once was loved when his victory was fresh and he was fresh, the Westerosi image of what a king should be. But now, the only tale told of his kindness or compassion is hours he spent at Jon Arryn's side, reheating stories of the good old days, once Jon was already too far gone to speak with him. It's the most Robert thing ever. If Renly is loved and Stannis is feared, then Robert is just part of the furniture, a weather vane. His decline mirrors the decay of the realm. Robert ruled the nights of summer, and winter is coming. Set Robert side by side with his summary sibling. Both endorse force to secure the Iron Throne for House Baratheon, even the murder of children. Robert wants blood, Renly is just pragmatic. When events placed Robert in defiance of the Iron Throne, rather than submit, he took up arms and slaughtered his foes. Would Renly? Would he forge an alliance with the Tyrells? And what would that take? We leave with more questions than answers. What improvements could be made on Robert is a query that logically invites the corollary. What are Robert's faults as king? That's a question that resonates beyond Renly and Loras. And that leads us to the best scene in the episode, and perhaps, maybe, the best in the whole show. Mark Strong, Lena Headey, take it the away. Chapter 11. A Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm going to break this scene down line by line. It deserves that honor. It's that good. So, before we immerse ourselves fully, let me recap everything we have discussed so far to make sure we are all on the same page at this tipping point. Plotline number 1. Tensions between the Starks and the Lannisters are at breaking point. Under King Robert in King's Landing, his in-laws who hold so much power over him prepare to shed blood against his best and last friend, Ned. Plotline number 2. Ned is closing in on the truth kept from the king. Ever more feverish scheming and backstabbing is playing out under the king's nose. Plotline number 3. Let's allow Cersei the honours to sum that up, shall we? I'm sorry your marriage to Ned Stark didn't work out. You seem so good together. Robert riposts in the same spirit. I'm glad I could do something to make you happy. You know who else's marriage hasn't worked out? Robert and Cersei. Neither makes the other happy. Ned in Winterfell too thought he was seeing a Robert he could joke and reminisce with. That Robert was a mirage. The scene contrasts in such a devastating way between Renly and Loras because there's none of that easy rapport and mutual affirmation here. But worse than that, this isn't a case of, well, we're sacrificing our happiness for the good of the realm. It's not like they're an equivalent couple. Ferdinand and Isabella deciding what is best for the realm. Robert lends her no place at council and no respect for her intelligence. The fact that Cersei makes a lot of moronic choices off the back of her comically awful motives leads much of the audience to forget that you can regularly blunder and also be smart. She can clearly outsmart her husband and a host of other lessers in King's Landing. She's just a high variance player. What has Robert got to show for wisdom? Their new relationship is downright adversarial. Cersei raises the subject of appointing a new hand to replace Ned, and Robert instantly assumes she wants Jean. Robert hypocritically judges Jean for 2 reasons. Because he did the dirty deed to clear out the throne for Robert's backside, and for being Tywin Lannister's favourite son, the man who keeps Robert firmly plonked there. Jean is sworn to defend a man who insults his sister's honour, while Jean must shoulder the dishonour of Kingsland. Robert's contempt with Jean anticipates his treasons, but it's for all the wrong reasons, like hating on Jimmy in the first couple seasons. But Cersei demonstrates the nuances of her relationship to Jean when she replies that he's not serious. Open up Bran 2, A Game of Thrones, and see Cersei engage with Jean as a serious, intelligent adult. His replies are dismissive. He promises to fix problems by simply killing. He's not cut out for court intrigue, and he knows it, and she knows it. In this way, we already touch on the complicated power dynamics between Cersei, queen but also woman, and Jean, a servant but one with supreme physical power. And again, we can draw contrast with Loras and Renly. Both are warrior socialite pairings, but Loras is the climber in that relationship despite his political ignorance, subverting social categories that Cersei and Jean adhere to. Cersei asked Robert if it was worth losing Ned over the Targaryen issue. That's odd. She would clearly, happily kill children to protect her family. She criticizes Jean for his attempt on Bran only because it was the wrong tool at the time. And she's no friend of Ned's. Jean has loathed Ned for 2 decades, and Cersei's attempt to undo the damage done by Lady's execution quickly devolved into remarking to Ned's face how he was unfit to lead Winterfell, never mind the small council of the Seven Kingdoms. And you know what? When the Mad King executed his brother, she tap-danced on his grave. They are plainly the rivals for Robert's heir. Why risk giving Robert the idea to call him back? That's exactly what Robert does at the start of the next episode. Yet Robert's offers rocker. He threatens to Ned that if he doesn't return the role, he'll make Jean his hand instead. And before you say he's bluffing or joking or never follow through, idle threats are corrosive to credibility. Don't say you're going to make Jean the hand unless you're ready to make Jean the hand. Robert bluffing is bad, following through would be disastrous. We've established Jean is incompetent, more importantly. Hello? Robert? Hello? He's the Kingslayer! He is the biggest oathbreaker in Westeros. Keeping him in the Kingsguard is bad enough, and the reason that Jean was recruited into the Kingsguard by King Aerys in the first place was to weaken Tywin Lannister. Can you imagine the kind of power you'd be handing him by giving his son the powers of the king? Robert's failed to shield himself against Tywin evokes the capo who thinks that because Da Boss knows he depends on Da Boss for protection and privileges, he could never be discarded. Both there and here, Robert seems to toss the idea out simply to project a fear of the Lannisters at his throat. But Cersei has no such inclination to maneuver her pick into the hand's place. The conspirators of King's Landing think they can run circles around Ned, and Cersei's self-confidence is rivaled only by Littlefinger's. If anything, it suits her more for him to stay. Ned is a fish out of water at court, unfamiliar with procedure. His only friend is Robert, who has no active agenda to direct Ned towards. The status quo effectively neutralizes the hand. The alternative is Robert replacing Ned with a hand closer to and stronger at court. Say, perhaps one Mace Tyrell? That is a doomsday scenario for Lannister control. If she has come here with any purpose, it is to encourage Robert to maintain the status quo. Robert can't stand the idea of introspecting about whether it was worth losing Ned. He simply says, "I don't know," and moves on. The Starks paid the iron price to put Robert on the throne, and Robert cares about that throne more than his friends. Like earlier in this episode, he ruminates on the Targaryen Dothraki host. This further develops the theme of how the loyal friend that was young Robert has disappeared inside the paranoid shell of a man he now is. Cersei has to let the subject of hand go. He's the king, he kinda gets to do what he wants.
I want you to stay. I'm the king, I get what I want. Easy, boy. You might be my brother, but you're speaking to the king.
You can't really tell the worst of his name. The first of his name, King of the Andals and Protector of the Realm. Let's put a pin in that and we'll circle back to it once we pass the rest of the items on the agenda. But importantly, symbolically, this means that for the rest of the scene, Cersei is not working in anger. All we are seeing is a glimpse into how Cersei and Robert spend time together as husband and wife. They live in the same palace and they share the same quarters. Even though they detest each other, even though Robert loves to get away on his hunting trips, they can't always avoid each other. Sometimes they do just korero. Cersei delivers an astute analysis of Dothraki weaknesses in war, like their lack of siege weapons. On the one hand, Robert is dismissive of Cersei, as Tane often are, and treats her words as her father's ideas. The show continues to build Tywin up as a Tane to be feared and resented, not just rich, but good at war. On the other, the writers sees an opening. Rather than cementing our perception of Robert as an idiotic berserker, we see he comprehends war well. A lesser series would seem to embrace the idea of fighting Dothraki in open combat. That would put his stupidity and desire for violence and glory on full display. Instead, Robert presents the nuances of strategy. He knows full well the dangers, however he points out that he and all the other lords hiding in their castles would leave the villages and farms, their sources of soldiers and food, undefended. They would be razed, their inhabitants even enslaved. Cersei thinks she's cunning for coming up with a ruthless solution.
And I don't know that she's the best conspirator. What do you think?
She's just not good at it. That's one of the interesting things about this scene, is that neither Cersei and Jaime are particularly good at this. Cersei tries, but she doesn't have much talent for it. She keeps being brought up short by her inability to consider any other person a human being. That tends to be Cersei's downfall over and over again. She just doesn't get it that other people have thoughts inside their head. This is just a foreign concept to her, and it screws her over repeatedly.
Robert thinks, unlike her, about what happens outside of the lords and ladies' castles. Once again, we return to Machiavelli's question. If you can't have it both, is it better to be feared than loved? By associating Cersei's ideas with Tywin, we learn that the Warden of the West falls heavily on the ruthless side of the equation. More ruthless than Robert, outside of the lords and ladies' paths.
Wise move. Only a fool would meet the Dothraki in an open field.
Who is himself more ruthless than lords like Ned or Renly or even Varys. It's a cascade of bad to worse. The council struggles to restrain a violent king who dances to the strings of a positively ravenous father-in-law. The lion does not concern himself with disproportionate casualty ratios. The chevauchee will proceed. Ruthless can get results. As we will see in the Riverlands, sending Sir Gregor's warband to sack and pillage farms does challenge local lords like Ed Metelli to put up or shut up. The Crown too faces that pressure. In the Golden Crown, Ned dispatches Lord Beric Dondarrion's party to apprehend Gregor. But Robert worries that if the Dothraki land and aren't dealt with fast,
they leave
the
us in
people
our
will lose their
castles.
outer half. Then
They
they'll
go
love
from
Viserys,
town to town.
Then they'll make him king. Will the people embrace the child burning their crops and selling their family? However, in the process, the murderers and those who sent them earn a bitter hatred. We see this everywhere, from the small folk and hedge knights of the Brotherhood without banners, all the way to Brynden Blackfish's determination to hold out. The threat of cavalry running free should give any lord pause, because of their chivalric obligation to defend the innocent. But even from a realpolitik point of view, it's hardly a done deal that the ruler's reign is over. Otherwise, nobody would build castles, and lords would fall like flies. So Robert fears the faults of ruthlessness perhaps more than he should, from a purely self-interested perspective. And that speaks to the depths of the king's paranoia. He's plainly disinterested in running the country and self-aware about that apathy. His main connection to his people is through his lavish tournaments he can never seem to stop funding. Tournaments he cannot even fight in himself anymore. Even that popular link is tenuous. If the royal court gets tickets to all the good seats, what percentage of the huge low-born population of King's Landing can realistically squeeze into what's left? How long do the people of the Seven Kingdoms stand behind their absentee king, their cowardly king? Robert is haunted by this question. Targaryen invasion would furnish the realm with an alternative monarch to consider, and that uncertainty will create openings for other claimants to make a move. When will Mace Tyrell acquire a confidence in proportion to his power, and when will Doran Martell demand his satisfaction? Tywin Lannister once waited for his liege to lose, then marched in to take King's Landing. What's to say the next time he won't dispense with the puppetry and crown himself? What's to say Ned won't pull the same move Cersei sees it? Back it up, a Targaryen invasion remains Robert's hypothetical. And as Ned points out, there are a lot of ifs to that hypothetical. If the child lives, if it's a boy, if Khal Drogo makes good on his promise, if they find a way to cross the Narrow Sea, if war crimes do more to help Viserys than hurt him, if. But Robert can't stop fixating on the hypothetical. That demonstrates the unreality of the threat.
When did the people decide that Viserys Targaryen is the rightful monarch after all?
Robert would love a war dropped in his lap on the mainland, with none of the effort of preparing some finicky invasion of the Stepstones or the Summer Isles. If he were confident in an imminent war, it'd buoy his spirits. He'd make preparations, raise armies, plan stratagems. He'd have a purpose again. No, the man with the sword isn't what he fears. What he fears is being dwarfed by the shadow on the wall. He's afraid of the judgment of some higher authority than king, the confirmation that he has failed as a ruler, the stone guest Le Comte de Monte Cristo descending to speak the words of guilt he repeats to himself in quiet hours. He is haunted by the shadow of the Targaryens, and he cannot stand that the world past the Mad King is nothing like his boyish dream. Robert, in his own way, is trapped brooding in nightmares of the past just as much as Eddard. Cersei, though, is no Catelyn to his Ned. She is not here to emotionally reassure and support her husband. She wants to talk about armies and power, the tools of violence and destruction, rather than the means of peace and growth. Ned and Catelyn nurture their garden. To Robert and Cersei, there are grapevines and then there are weeds. She continues the hypothetical. We outnumber them. That is a very interesting statement. Picture if all of South America was one country, roughly the size of Westeros. Picture Mongolia. Which would you say has the bigger army? A larger, denser landmass typically possessing greater force is the obvious conclusion today, South America, Westeros. But the permanent armies that strategy games love to lean on are a relatively modern invention, the result of improved efficiency, productivity, and administration. Let's do some generalization. Medieval kingdoms needed all their peasants working most of the time just to get by. Spending a lot of tax dollars to permanently remove a chunk of your own taxable population from the workforce is a good way to wreck your economy and fall behind other countries. So instead, medieval armies operated by levy obligations. The local lord theoretically protects you and provides you with justice, and in return, they can call you away from your farm or other specialty for a while to come fight in their wars. All of this to say that nomadic horse-riding warriors are a glaring exception to the rule. Fighting went hand in hand with sustaining their nation through plunder and fresh grazing. So you'd think 40,000 Dothraki would vastly outnumber. I mean, who in Westeros even is armed after 15 years of peace? The Night's Watch take no part in the wars of the realm, and I cannot even list the number of ways in which the wildlings would not come to help. The Reavers have hauled down their sails. That leaves each noble house's sons and knights, and the hedge knights and sellswords who handle banditry and petty disputes. All combined, no way they crack 10,000, and yet Cersei is confident that this Targaryen invasion closing in would be outnumbered. Why? Please turn to Brendan B. Fisher's excellent analysis of what a clash of kings implies about Westerosi military preparedness. Namely, for Tywin's armies totaling nearly 40,000 soldiers to be readily available, they must have already amassed their forces. They have motive, the growing tensions with two of the great houses Arryn and Stark, tipping over an already unstable equilibrium with the Martells and Greyjoys. They have means, what with all their wealth. And they have opportunity, precisely because of the 15 years of peace, the stubborn lawfulness of the Starks, and the strange isolationism of the Arryns and Tullys. If events in King's Landing produce a war, then the Lannisters can strike first before other armies are ready. In many ways, Season 1 represents July 1914, the mutual contemplation of the risk of polity on boards if a rival mobilizes its armies before they can. Once again, the unstable equilibrium caves ever closer to war. Robert replies, which is the bigger number, Rimu or Tai? He's clearly positing a trick question with her as the fool, for probably far from the first time, but he's the king. She goes along with his premise and answers 5 anyway. Robert presents an analogy plain as day. Even 5 forces cannot stand divided against one united foe, which is an interesting number to pick. He rules over the 7 kingdoms, itself an outdated name for 9 realms. Yes, the analogy is probably dictated by the fact Robert has 5 and not 7 or 9 fingers, but let's take this as a political statement to prove one more time in one new way the deep instability underneath Robert's solid throne. Which 5 kingdoms would he be confident would stand behind him? We can pretty easily rule out the Iron Islands, the only kingdom to openly rebel against Robert's rule. Dorne still has it out for the monarch who benefited by the deaths of Elia and her children, Elia. The Crownlands and the Stormlands are likely one in Robert's minds, his Demesne as king, his Demesne as Baratheon, tomato. The books do little and the show less to distinguish the two regions. Yet, if we include Robert's old allies from the war years, we're still looking at 1. Direct rule from Robert, 2. The Vale, which is slouching towards isolationism, but Robert doesn't know that, 3. The Riverlands, 4. The North. Yes, Ned Stark wants to run away and bury his head in the snow, but only because he truly doesn't believe that a Dothraki invasion is coming. And I don't truly believe that Robert truly believes that his old friend Ned, a man he sees as family, would abandon him to the Targaryens. I think Robert fires up, then cools down, dismisses and then sees sense, and we know Robert has read enough of Varys' reports to judge Viserys a fool. No way would Ned swear his sword to a kid like that. And all this logic is situated against the backdrop of the collective awareness that, even if Ned is by now thoroughly repelled by Robert as a person, Ned is serious enough and can be trusted to try to do his best for his definition of the good of the realm. He's a trooper. Some characters definitely froth the sunk cost fallacy more than others. Quentin. And while Ned is not obsessed with shedding good blood after bad, he's loyal, honourable, and desperately looking for a way to believe they fought for something. But even if you disregard all these logical and emotional reasons why Ned would fight Khal Drogo to keep Robert on the throne, above all, I do not think that Robert really understands Ned's objections. Robert is not a smart man. Robert is the king, and he decrees that the foundation of his legitimacy is overthrowing the Targs, not an early modern human rights policy. Which leaves us with the Reach and the Westerlands and only one slot left. And Robert shows zero signs of displeasure with the Tyrells. Is Robert far more suspicious of them than we know? Nothing about Loras's invitation to Renly suggests it. This becomes even more implausible when we consider that A Game of Thrones reveals how the Tyrells were working on ingratiating themselves with Robert. We can only conclude Robert openly states to his wife, a Lannister who clearly directly communicates about strategy with her father, that he does not trust her family. Yikes. He keeps antagonizing the Lannisters even though he needs them. He ruins Cersei's life every day, he disgraces Jon, and he spreads hostility towards Tywin. How does he hope to beat the Dothraki without the Lannisters? What is he doing to stop Tywin marching into King's Landing once more? He refuses to make the most of his situation and utilize his marriage with Cersei to forge a stronger alliance, and he refuses to go in the other direction and even begin to unwind the levels of control they hold over him. There are so many options available to him. He could cut back on his spending for starters, like any celeb with a hole in their heart blowing exorbitant stacks on absurd distractions. It's the furthest thing from good for him. So saving up that tax revenue instead sounds like a win-win to me. He could hash out better terms with the Iron Bank. They clearly adjust their lending calculus based on a changing evaluation of the geopolitical scene. Wildly underutilized talents like Tyrion and Stannis would happily step up to tasks worthy of them, and Robert should strive to unite the Baratheons as a team. As for his enemies, he could fabricate some excuse to start a conflict. It's not like the Lannisters have many friends. If that's too big a risk, he could simply find a safe target to unite the realm against. Perhaps a trumped-up arrest of Gregor on new charges to appease the Dornish, or a purging of the mountain tribes to fulfill Jon Arryn's last wish. Why not tell Jalabar Joe that this is the year and sail off to establish a new client state? He could develop a reliable surveillance network parallel to Varys to monitor his enemies. We know he's happy to embrace moral trade-offs like these. He'll use the spider and kill innocents to keep the throne. He just can't be bothered. Our purpose died with the Mad King, Robert intones. He bemoans the primacy of gold in a world of backstabbing and sycophancy, though he fears Varys not and Littlefinger less. We never see Robert care about Lord Baelish, so any mention of money appears as yet another crack at the Lannisters. As he groans, "Your father wants to own the world." Cersei asks him, "What do you want?" Perhaps a direct attempt to gather information, but for how long they've known each other, I doubt it's anything more than futile hope and idle conversation. Silently, he smiles, holds his wine aloft, and drinks some more. Since the Greyjoy Rebellion, we haven't had a real fight in 9 years. Robert doesn't get to march to war and kill people anymore. All he has is drinking, feasting, woman hunting, and tourneys. He lacks ambition, just like Renly, yet Robert seems anything but content. He's restless. You get the sense that If a house dared to rebel against him, he would bellow himself hoarse till he had lost all colours save red in the face, cursing them to those 7 hells, and then he would be delighted for the entire march all the way there, up to and including smashing their faces in. We know he was still in good shape and great cheer by the time of the Greyjoy Rebellion, and what that
17
suggests
years
is that the
later.
end of that war made him realise that he would never get to enjoy himself this much again. He has no war. There is nobody in the world stupid enough to meet Robert Baratheon and his armies in the open again. Without room to swing his hammer, he is useless. All he has is being good enough with a hammer to kill Rhaegar Targaryen, a better man than he could ever be, and the ability to inspire loyalty in a few better men than himself. And he has survived not because his friends can keep him safe, but because his enemies can best lay the groundwork for their ambitions under a motionless king. Robert resembles less a ruler than a hollow idol, a living throne the realm offers sacrifices of blood and treasure to in order to keep the peace, and relying on liquor, binge eating and the sign of blood and gore to get through the day, or giant red banners for the health of his head. He bestows no gifts in return. His summertime reign has consisted of 6 years of cheer and 9 of misery, and winter is coming. Sometimes I don't know what holds it together, sighs Robert. Once again, he admits that he doesn't really know what to do. He has already lost to his fears. Our marriage, replies Cersei with a wry smile. Robert's eyes widen comically and he breaks into his wheezing laugh, and she laughs too. The two of them are a little silly in their cups. It is the first time we have seen Cersei laugh in the show, and even then we see a distracted look come over her face. Eyes glazed. The two are open on the facts. They are tired of this marriage, and yet, as they note sardonically, it endures. 15 years. This is the kind of partnership it takes to run the realm. One is of gold and scheming, the other of drinking and fighting, and the bond between their houses has been enough. For now. And then, the Queen drops a bombshell. What was she like? Chapter 12. Heartache. With these 4 words, Cersei thrusts the two of them into entirely uncharted territory, and Robert's face shows it. And as Cersei heartbreakingly explains, there's good reason for all the years and months and days in which this question went unasked. She wanted the memory of Lyanna to fade away for Robert. The fact that Lyanna didn't fade, that he must have kept bringing her up, around Cersei, to Cersei. The moment the king arrived at Winterfell, against Cersei's urgings, he demanded to see Lyanna. Ned loves him. Cersei hates him. Just as Robert aggravated Jon by showing his refusal to commit to Cersei, Cersei is aggravated by that unfaithfulness. As she unspools the depths of his spite and how much she feels he doesn't care, we see him ever so slightly shake his head. For once, they're being emotionally honest. They care about what the other feels and how to treat each other. They're no longer a script on a page rattling out plot. They are people.
And eventually it became clear
Robert,
that my spite didn't mean anything to you.
Enough man made of scheming and backstabbing to notice what's been going on in King's Landing. He's smart enough to ask the question that should by now be on the mind of any viewer at home. So why now? And Cersei's answer is enormously telling.
What harm could Lyanna Stark's ghost do to either of us that we haven't done to each other 100 times over?
Cersei is doing something never here spoken of otherwise. She is being generous to him, to frame this wreckage of lives as what they've done to each other. Cersei is a thoroughly evil person, but she has never set out to ruin Robert. She's an unfaithful wife who lied about their kid's parentage. That's grounds for an acrimonious divorce and difficult questions about who will step up to look after their innocent offspring. He is a monstrous, abusive, deadbeat, unfaithful husband. As we will shortly see opening the Golden Crown, he hits her when he is unhappy with her, and he threatens to hit her to gain her compliance. He shows off how little he needs her for his satisfaction and hurts her anyways. For all his claims he cares not for greed nor gold nor the trap of his throne, he exploits Cersei not just as a punching bag, not just as a marital slave, but as a walking credit card. the conduit to Tywin's power and money, to keep him on his throne and in the lifestyle he's accustomed to, involuntarily fathering heirs on her that he has no intent of applying remotely the same love to as she does. The stay-at-home dad who leaves the kids to pinch and prod each other in the hot car while he goes to JJ's. He does not see her as a person. He does not treat her as a person. By all the laws of Westeros, were he not positioned atop the laws, at the top of the laws, at the top of the legal system, he Sir Ilyn Payne's blade for his neck without a second thought. She has every right to hate him. Cersei could have asked about Lyanna Stark years ago. She never did. Perhaps she is prompted by the presence of Ned Stark and his daughters. She looks at Sansa Stark and she sees another would-be queen from the north come along to outshine her. Or perhaps it is simply because she can sense the tension crackling in the air since the Starks came south. Things are in motion. She may not get the years she thought she would to ensure Joffrey's smooth ascendancy to the throne, to deal first with Stannis and Renly as claimants. Her everyday monotony could spiral out of recognition. She may not get the chance to ask again. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome talk. To be an attentive, sympathetic wife for his sake just once before everything goes to hell. What was the woman who epitomized the decent man that Robert used to be like? Or, at least, the mirage of that, before all of the choices he made. The woman whose memory binds him to Ned Stark, who the Targaryens took, who he lost. And Robert leans in close enough to smell the wine on his breath, and he makes one of those choices. He chooses to devastate her with the same pain he has clung to like Davos and debris for almost 2 decades. You want to know the horrible truth?
I can't even remember what she looked like.
Robert is desperately, hopelessly fixated on the memory of Lyanna, and yet he has drowned himself so vigorously in his cups and polished his pain so perfectly that, like a record eroded through endless replays, he no longer even really has the memory of Lyanna. What does he even harbour regrets over? Does he remember what she was like as a person? Or is she really just a symbol, an excuse, for everything he hates about his own life, about history, about the way everything went? Is Lyanna now nothing more than his excuse to treat Cersei as poorly as he thinks Rhaegar treated Lyanna? Does he feel compelled into trauma reenactment to cope past crimes perpetuated into the present, the worst semblance of control over what he could not control then? Cersei's face, just look at that. Robert's reason for everything being awful, for all the terrible choices he has made, the vision of a better reality she presents. I only know she was the one thing I ever wanted. Robert could not have her. Whether his love was sweet and sincere, or just his need to possess an object called wife, he does not care about life without her. He has no motive. He is a nonsense king. When he says, our purpose died with the Mad King, he means mine. Me. He has no plan for the 7 kingdoms he won. He fumbled them from the start. He gave their ancestral seat of Storm's End to Renly without reason, and Dragonstone practically exiled to Stannis. He has never been grateful for what his own brother did to make him king, depriving him of the ally he so badly needs. He openly mocks even Renly in front of his courtiers, and look where that's getting him. He could only hold on to his love for life when his life was death. He cannot recall his one lost love, but as he tells Barristan, remembers every face he's ever crushed in. Like Viserys I in House of the Dragon, Robert will soon turn to violence again to distract from his shaky rule. Both here tell of a white hart, a beautiful deer they must slay to prove their worthiness, and embark on a hunt, though each conduct theirs very differently. Robert's target instead ends up being a common boar, suitably for such a crude man. I turn to the sublime analysis of Stephen Atwell. Atwell was killed by cancer a few months after I published the original version of this video. I mourn that loss of life to such an awful disease and admire the years he made the most of even after losing a leg. And to those of you who are fighting cancer or know someone who is, you have my strongest encouragement. Best of luck. I highly recommend Atwell's Race for the Iron Throne chapter by chapter analysis, as the best and deepest writing I have ever encountered on A Song of Ice and Fire. Allow me to quote his write-up on Eddard 12, which corresponds to episode 7, 2 episodes from now, You Win or You Die. Atwell writes, "There is an interesting contrast between the White Hart and the Boar. The White Hart symbolized purity and innocence, especially in the context of medieval Europe. The Boar, on the other hand, represented wild anger, uncontrollable rage, virility, and suicide, as wild boars were known and feared for their ability to, even when stabbed with a spear, pull themselves out the spear and kill the hunter. In this chapter, Robert goes in search of innocence. It's possible to see this hunt as a kind of symbolic suicide, as Robert slays his drive for living. Only now are we reaching the emotional catharsis of Robert's ruin. Frankly, he has been bloody lucky to last for so long. The Targaryens went down in one fell swoop rather than putting him through the trials of a protracted war, a vibrant insurgency, or a simple assassin's retribution. The Lannisters have gotten more use out of puppeteering than dispatching. His allies from the war remain loyal as long as they live. His brothers are unambitious, and Stannis would never break his oaths to act on his grievances. Robert has had a lot of chances to make new enemies over the years, and so far he has gotten away with murder. Somehow, the Nothing King endures. Robert holds on to the Seven Kingdoms jealously, fearfully, still haunted by how Targaryen rule took his Lyanna from him. He contemplates abdication to go play at warrior, but he has not raised his son remotely well enough to entrust the realm to him, nor developed the kind of institutions that could produce a successful regency. He is unable to care enough for the realm to Tywin Lannister or get off the pot, to abdicate or act the king, unable to move on and accept it all could have been for nothing, and that's okay if he just turns the ship around late in the day. He doesn't even bother to really endeavour to hold the realm against other claimants. He's only trying to stop the Targs and seems apathetic or ignorant about the rise of other factions.
The only threat he can focus on is the Targaryens. Ironically, the most distant of threats.
Right.
The one that's the most only looming in this book. The one that will trouble him, as Ned says. This is a shadow of a threat, half a world away. There are knives at the door that he's just not paying attention to.
After all, even if any reasonable person fears the prospect of a bad king coming to power, who could be a worse king than Robert himself? I'm going all out at Robert because he is firmly cemented as a fan favourite from the show, and I want to challenge the train of thought that leads to that conclusion. Don't get it twisted, I enjoy watching Robert. Mark Strong's performance is really charismatic and entertaining. He makes me laugh, he makes me smile. But I have no empathy for the character, because he's simply good vibes dressed over bad choices. What is the difference between Mark Strong's Robert Baratheon and, say, Forrest Whitaker's Idi Amin? Both are great performances depicting compelling figures who our protagonist wants to like as much as us. And yet both turn out to be paranoid incompetents who shed blood for the privilege to keep running their countries into the ground and treat women like furniture. What distinguishes Robert Baratheon from a Boris Yeltsin, a boozy replacement for great tyranny, who still slaughters civilians to hold on to power and signs off on a heartless successor with the makings of another tyrant? All Robert has to offer is a good economy for now. Can you tell me a single thing he did to create that? You can't, and he is breaking the economy of the next generation. So if you default to thinking of Robert as a decent dude because he's funny and friends with our main character, reconsider. Especially if that leads you to miss how astoundingly well acted and hilariously beautifully written Cersei Lannister is. She is one of the crowning achievements of George R. R. Martin's art, and you owe it to yourself not to let Robert's larger-than-life presence crowd her out. The year Robert won ultimate power was the year his life ended, the starting gun in the race to bankrupt the realm. With meaningless distractions until his body catches up with his soul, he literally cannot fit in his armor anymore. This is metaphor as clear as it gets, who refuses to adapt and accept who he now is, continuing to try to crowd himself into the life of a young warrior, one that cannot be sustained. For 15 years, Cersei has been sentenced to share the cell with. The door's locked, he swallowed the key, and right now, Robert cannot even spare Cersei the horror of the truth. He lays on her just how little worth he sees in her life with him. It's nothing but hate and power persisting. And so Cersei, made into all that she is by all that she has endured, from Tywin and Jean and Robert, chooses to lash right back. I felt something for you once, you know? This one moment of weakness, where he admits he is guilty, she drives the stake in.
No.
She says, yes, you should suffer. I know. His eyes are downcast in shame. Consider what she tells Ned in You Win or You Die, in a conversation of the highest rank. She was delighted to marry Robert, much as Sansa is delighted by her engagement to Joffrey, a handsome, noble hero with all the strength of the realm, perfect companion to her as the queen, at last properly appreciated and empowered. And she realized on their wedding night that he had no place in his heart for her, that he was already in love with another woman, a dead woman. The betrothal of Sansa to Joffrey promises to pass on the same tragedy now down to a new generation. From Aerys and Joanna, to Rhaegar and Lyanna, to Robert and Cersei, to Joffrey and Sansa, all act out the same script, unable to deny the gravitational pull of power and patriarchy. Even after we lost our first boy. And now, Cersei is utterly beyond him, looking past the man in front of her. She is speaking only for her own sake, because she knows that that miscarriage was no accident. Robert tried to control her reproductive destiny, so she seized control back through what, for this time, must have seemed like a deep and dark crime. Secretly denying Robert his own children. She is rubbing in his face her own little vengeance on him. Just as Lyanna never lived to bear Robert any children, so too was Cersei never truly the father of his children. She never loved him, she never carried on his line to inherit the Seven Kingdoms and protect him against Targaryens. She robbed him of his last flicker of purpose, the hope that his children could be better than him. She next intends to remove every last one of the Baratheons left. If you set aside Robert's illegitimate offspring, and their weak claims to the throne, the only remaining Baratheons are the three brothers and Shireen, the legitimate daughter not of Robert, but of Stannis. Robert doesn't know all of this, and hey, plenty of parents rightly look at their kids who happen not to share their genetic material as their kids because they raised them and they love each other. Robert wouldn't accept his children as his if he knew the truth, but he does think they are his children, just as much as that dead boy with the brown hair. And that means he must reckon with how much he has failed when it comes to children. He refused to be present for the births of his own children, letting his fear win when his wife needed him most. He is neglectful, as he tells Joffrey in You Win or You Die. In Tyrion 1, Joffrey says, "I cannot abide the wailing of women."
Listen, son.
I can't stand the wailing of women.
He moves his lips and his father's words come out. All that his heir has learnt from him is that cruelty and callousness earn you power. The only thing that Robert has done for his children is kill other children to secure their future. Happy birthday! I brought you a limited edition inbred baby skull cup. The realm is broken in every way. It's done. This can't go on. For quite a while, actually. Robert failed her. Even though she had had her hopes crushed, even though she had eyes for Jean, she could have chosen to move on from Lyanna, to love his wife, to reciprocate her interest, and he chose not to. Was it ever possible for us? Was there ever a time, ever a moment? Even after a wedding night, she still hoped things could be made right. Perhaps she had not yet lost hope that he would master the drink instead of drink mastering him. She was yet to see how much of his potential he would waste, how the power she would thrill to use has wasted away in his hands as easily as Lannister gold. Even now she is sharing just once that she has honestly held love in her heart for anybody other than a Lannister, a truth shared with the man who loathes her most in the world. It is heart-rending to watch. No. Cersei hides her cherry face in her wine. Does that make you feel better or worse? Her mouth's open. Her jaw clenches. She breathes in. And then, an expression. It's an expression we'll come to see from Cersei so many times. It's a Lena Headey's specialty. It is one that she is forced to present outwardly to the world again and again, being the wife, binding their marriage, waiting for a Robertless future. She throws her hair back, tilts her head, closes her lips into a tight line, gazes upon him with eyes that are suddenly devoid of emotion. She shakes her head as she speaks, lifting her eyebrows almost carelessly. It doesn't make me feel anything. One last swallow reveals a few tears remain. She sets the cup down, stands, and walks away. Robert stares at the space she filled the same way he always looks at her, like she was never really there. Then he reaches for the wine and pours himself another drink. Door opens, and the woman in sole possession of the future walks out. The door closes, and the man entirely possessed by the past is left. We cut to a cat house and the Game of Thrones goes on. But Robert is done. Cersei is just getting started.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground.
And if it gets copyright struck, too bad, I'm coming back, I'm fixing it up, and I'm posting it again.